Teaching kids how to adult? What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host, Brett Dupree, your Joyous Expansion life coach, here for episode 27? Yes, 27. I should really start looking before I say the number. Today I have an interview with Kyle Grapon. He did a great job. I look forward to you listening to it. But first, I'm going to talk about my life because that's how I start every podcast. Because this podcast is about going through life and working through the things and being vulnerable. And I got to start with myself because if I do not start with me, how can I ask my guests to be vulnerable? If you noticed and been actually paying attention, I've been doing the Church of Awesome Commandments. And if you noticed, last week I didn't do it, and this week I'm not going to do it either because I am no longer going to be doing that because I have started my own podcast, the Church of Awesome Podcast, which is part of the Seven Stones Radio Network. I will put a link to the latest version of the Church of Awesome Podcast, the first introductory section. If you are a follower of this podcast, the first 5 episodes might be a little redundant, but they will be at least 15, hopefully 20 minutes. That's my goal. I got like 18 minutes, but then I cut it down to 15 because I edit my stuff. I love editing. But it was fun. I paid my friend Michael Vadova for the soundtrack. I wanted something along the lines of the HBO feature presentation. If you were around in the 80s, HBO used to have the best freaking music that started every feature presentation. None of this was a bling or what it does now. It just started with this rumbling, and then it was also da na 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 da na na pa pa da pa da na na pa pa da pa da na na dun 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 da na da na da na na, yeah. And it'd be this big HBO just flying through the air, just coming right at you. And when the music hits, you're in the O, and there's lights, and it's shining down in the feature presentation. And I was like, yes, Spies Like Us is going to be awesome. And that's how I want people to start my podcast, The Church of Awesome, which is when before you hear it, that you hear it, and then you are pumped to listen to it. And I think Michael Vadova did a good job of creating that music. So if you're interested in having awesome music of yourself, send me an email and I'll give you I'll give you your email back. No, I will give him your information, and you too can have an awesome kick butt podcast jingle in front of your podcast or whatever you want to do. It is super fun. I like it. I mean, the one for this one was made by Shifty Pop, who I absolutely love as well. She's on Fiverr, and I went to her first because I wanted everything to have the same sound, but I wanted something epic, and she was like, that's not really in my wheelhouse. I'm more of a toy-tastic person, and that's why I was like, that's why I asked. But yeah. So I'm very pumped about starting a second podcast, though there is the feeling of crunch on time. I'm thinking probably in June, I'll probably going to one of my Toastmaster clubs twice a month to give me some Thursdays to continue. I'm getting towards the end of my interviews. I had this huge swath of interviews in April, and I'm finally getting to the point of catching up. I have one interview this Sunday, which I'm really excited about, with this lady named Nancy Rebecca. Hopefully I'll get that out next weekend, or I might have to put one of the other recorded ones out. And then that's it. Then I have 2 others, so I have like 3 weeks. So I need to send another 13 or so to the podcast guest people, which it's been a while since they've heard from me, over a month. But since I am one person and I can only do so many interviews, but some people tend to filter out themselves, though the ones I've had have been really good. I also have some of my friends still waiting to pick the right time that I'm looking forward to interviewing. This is fun. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy being pumped. This refocusing on what I love about podcasts instead of the sadness of everything not going exactly how I want is getting better. I mean, this time when I looked at how many people listened to my last podcast, I didn't go on Facebook and just unfriend random people. like I did the time before to make me feel better. It's like I have 1,000 Facebook friends and I should have at least 100 views. At least 10% of the people who say they're my friend should follow me. That's what I think. Why be my friend if you don't want to listen to my podcast? Seriously, I'm awesome. You can listen to my sexy, sexy voice. I mean, why would you turn that down? And if you're family, you can listen to a familiar voice of somebody that you love and someone you care about. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Because my voice is awesome. So if you're listening to this and you were unfriended 2 weeks ago, send me a friend request. My bad. Maybe I shouldn't have unfriended you. I'm getting better. I'm working on the resilience aspect of this. That's one reason why I started the Church of Awesome podcast. So I want to take my life to a next level, and now I'm making the decision to do so because I've been just mediocre for too long. I'm so good at things that I won't say don't matter, but that don't make me money. I'm good at content creation of stuff that people don't listen to, and I'm excellent at Toastmasters, which is a wonderful organization, but it's not good if you want to make money. It's actually very bad if you want to make money because it's all volunteer-based and they don't pay you. I mean, maybe you can make money through meeting people at Toastmasters, but that has yet to happen for me. I did kind of get a gig at Bastyr University, which was pretty cool through Toastmasters, but I didn't make any money from it. But I should have took that opportunity farther. I had that. That's one of my regrets. So it's one thing I talked about. I'm going to say yes more to things because this is my dreams and this is me going for it and working on resilience and pushing forward, loving doing what I'm doing, like this podcast. I'm putting it out there. I'll see what happens after probably 50 episodes or so to see if I still like doing this. I got to give it a good over a year, over 50 something episodes to see if it takes off at all or if it doesn't. It doesn't matter. I know my girlfriend here, so hi, honey. I love you. So at least I know I have one for sure listen, as well as, hey, Kyle's friends or fans. Hope you like my mini rant. But that's the thing. This is me being vulnerable. This is me being who I am. This is, I think, is an important part of my podcast is for me to also share each and every week. So you see where I am and who I am at that time. Because this is a process. Life is a process. There's many ups and there's many downs. And if you're with me through the long haul, maybe you will be hearing a rise story or maybe you'll be hearing a fall story, but you'll be hearing a story of someone being authentic, someone moving forward, and somebody who is loving what he does or working towards loving it even more, living from his heart, living from his soul, and pushing forward because that's the most important thing to do, is to push forward. And if you want to push forward, a person you want to listen to is Kyle because he did a great job in his interview. At first, it was mostly about his passion for talking to children, but then he was kind enough to give a sneak peek behind the curtain and talked about how the sausage is made and the struggles of what it takes to push forward and create a business that he wants to create, which is living from his passions. And it's really cool for him to do that. And I truly appreciate every time somebody comes on here and shares who they are. So not only is he inspirational in what he does, he's inspirational because of he's willing to share who he is. So Kyle Grapon is a youth motivational speaker and published author. He is also a student success coach and online teacher. He has spent the last 2 years speaking to schools in the northeastern region area about being prepared for the real world. Everything he does is designed to inspire students to think differently about education and answer the question, what type of person do you want to become? Now here's my interview with Kyle Grapon. Hello, Kyle, and welcome to my podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So you speak to youth about things?
Sure. So I speak to high school and college students, and what I talk about is basically the real world, this part of life that you and I are currently in, which combines being an adult and working full time. And I really started this a couple years ago after graduating college about 10 years ago and working in the real world for a number of different companies. And I really started to notice that a lot of people are genuinely unhappy with their careers and their jobs. And the worst part about it is that we've kind of made that okay as a society. And we've kind of said, you're not supposed to enjoy your job. It's okay to be miserable for most of the week. And I just found that unacceptable. So I started a very long and strange and wonderful journey about 2 years ago trying to figure out what was going on. And I started with interviewing a number of college graduates about their time in high school and college. And what came out of that was a lot of regrets and mistakes and basically not being prepared. I mean, I think if there's a word I use the most, it's prepared. So that's really what I talk about, and everything else I work on is really based on those principles.
Well, that makes sense. Over half the comics that I read growing up was all about hating my job, such as Dilbert was one of my favorite.
Exactly. Exactly. There's definitely a culture around it, especially when you talk to older generations. And I think it's funny because, millennials and younger generations seem to get a bad rap as if they don't want to work hard. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it has a lot to do with their questioning some of the things that go on and they're questioning their purpose and their value. Older generations never really looked at work that way. I think they just kind of looked at it as something you do and you don't question it too much. And also older generations, from the people I've talked to, felt comfortable working for a company for 40 years and didn't have to worry about the things that people work for today. So yeah, it's definitely a culture thing that the more people I talk to, the more people are like, yeah, you know what, you are right. It is a cultural thing when it comes to disliking your job.
It also seemed like for the older generations that companies had this idea of taking care of their employees where they would get pensions and they'd be able to retire. Well, today, as somebody who worked as a contractor, I never get the feeling that my company gives a crap about me.
No, I totally understand that feeling. And I think that, like you said, there used to be pensions. There used to be a number of benefits. And again, I mean, there was the people my neighbor who unfortunately recently passed away, he spent, I think, 35 years with one company. He got out of the army, he took a job, and he was there for 35 years. My grandfather was with a bank for, I believe, almost 40 years. And there was that kind of loyalty that went both ways. And, that's gone. I mean, you have positions where you're a contractor or a freelancer. And I mean, sometimes the company doesn't care about you. I mean, I'm lucky enough. I have a contract position and I feel very, very wanted and accepted and valued at my company. But, there are people who are struggling to find that full-time job. And when they're working in a position with no benefits and no guarantee that the position will be there in 3 to 6 months, I mean, how do you get into it, right? How do you get emotionally involved in it? And I think if that's how you're starting your career, you kind of start to look at it as me versus them, which is a terrible way to look at it because now all of a sudden you're counting the hours until you get to go home and you've kind of written off your day and not trying to look at anything that's positive. I mean, I know that, I work with people and one of my huge, huge pet peeves is when people say to me, I can't wait till it's Friday, or is it Friday yet? Or is it the weekend yet? And I always stop people. I was like, you have to find some sort of joy in everything you do every day. Because if you don't, you're spending the majority of your life unhappy. And I don't think people really realize that until it's too late. That's kind of a lot of what I come from. A lot of what I'm saying is really just based on the people I've worked with, the everyday people that I've worked with, that I've interviewed, and this idea of disliking your job. And I think the reason so many people ended up this way is because they weren't prepared for this step in their life.
That's interesting. One thing that I'm curious about is what got you into wanting to actually do something about it, because a lot of people, well, don't.
Sure. For myself, I've always felt like I could be doing more with my life. I felt like that from a very early age. I'm somebody who didn't really take advantage of a lot of opportunities that education gave me. I have some regrets when it comes to high school and college that I've kind of moved on from because I have no choice, but I've always felt like I was destined for more. I've always also felt that I have unique skills, public speaking and writing and communications and now kind of entrepreneurship. And these are skills that not necessarily everybody has. And I'm not saying that I'm better than anybody else. I mean, I couldn't be a doctor or a nurse, and you could make a good case that they're doing much more valuable work than what I'm doing. But I just feel as if all I'm doing is working in an office, I'm not really living up to my standards, myself. I decided a few years ago that I was going to try to pursue something more, something meaningful. It's always come back to this passion of helping students who are in high school, who are in college, understand what life is like and what they really actually need to be learning and what they need to be doing and what being an adult is like, and kind of challenging them to think outside the box and pursue their careers. Because for me, at the end of the day, if I look back on my life and I can look at, even if it's just a handful, I mean, hopefully it's more, but even if it's just a handful of students who are living happier, more fulfilled, more satisfying lives based on something I wrote in my book or something I said to them in a coaching session or in a keynote speech, I'll know that my life was well spent. And that's what's important to me. I think for whatever reason, I'm very much of a long-term thinker. And I'm honestly always thinking about when the day comes, when it's time for me to check out and what kind of life am I going to have and what am I going to look back on? And some people have said that's a morbid way to look, but I think that it's important for me to always be doing something to help other people. I think helping other people is something I'm super passionate about. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but it always came back to I can help students understand what I didn't understand. The more I talk to adults, graduates, educators, everybody says the same thing. I wasn't prepared. Well, I think I can be the person who brings this issue up. And what I've always wanted to do is I want to be the person who challenges the idea that you're supposed to hate your job, because that's where we're going, I think, as a country. And that's just something that if I know that if I dedicate my life to this, I'll be perfectly satisfied no matter what happens. Even if I don't reach the heights that I set for myself, it'll be a lot better than just being somebody who says, yeah, somebody should do something about that, but then doesn't actually do it themselves.
That makes sense. Though I think and if you look at the historical standpoint, I think most of our lives in the industrial era was just you wake up, you go to work, you go to sleep, then you die eventually. The idea of actually enjoying your job, I think, is a relatively new concept.
It definitely is. And again, it's interesting because a lot of people will, and they're well intentioned when they do this, but a lot of people will send me random articles that talk about how you can't be happy at your job or don't follow your passion. And I always kind of say to them that what I talk about is so much deeper than the word happiness, because the word happiness is incredibly complicated. I mean, I love what I do as a speaker and an author and a coach, but there are things I do that I don't like to do, but it's a part of the game because it is work at the end of the day. But I talk about not even so much joy or happiness, but also a sense of satisfaction and a sense of fulfillment and impact. And again, if you're somebody who truly enjoys your office job, your 9-to-5 job, and you feel like you're using your skills and you feel like you're making a difference, that something you consider a difference, that's great. But I think too many people just think that I have this passion, I have this idea, but it's too far outside the box. It's okay if I don't love my job. And listen, I'm not saying that you have to love your job. I think love is something that's really kind of reserved for family and friends and free time. But I think that I always challenge students to get in touch with who they want to be as a person. And I think if you know that there's something you want to work towards, if you want to help a certain amount of people, maybe you still will be an accountant. Maybe you still will work in HR. But if you really want to work in a certain industry because you know that's your passion, you're probably going to enjoy that more. You're going to have more of a fulfillment than if you're just working for some random company. Yes, I mean, in a very long-winded way, going back to what you were saying, this idea of enjoying on some level what you do is relatively new, but I think it's important because I see a lot of people who are very unhappy for most of the week. And it's a shame because one of the things I think kills me is when I interview or I give out a survey to a college graduate, I asked them, I said, if you could have any job, what would you want? And when they answer the question, they don't answer with some crazy job. They don't say they want to be an actor or a singer or a baseball player. The jobs that they want are relatively normal in a sense, but they just feel like they can't go and do them. And they feel like they can't break away from what they're currently doing. And I think that's a shame because these people want to work hard and they may not love what they do, but they're going to have that satisfaction at the end of the day that I think is currently missing.
You brought up an interesting point. You're working hard you're an entrepreneur, you're a speaker. What aspects of what you're doing do you not enjoy?
When I have to do outreach, when I have to cold email people, that can get very tedious because you're emailing a lot of people who don't get back to you and you're kind of typing out. I type out individual emails to try to give that personal touch, but then you're spending more time on something that you kind of know in the back of your head might never garner anything. I think that's one of the things. The whole paperwork and taxes and becoming an LLC was all something that can be tedious at times. I know that, my book is going to be on sale very soon. And I know that I'm going to be the one shipping those books out because I'm a one-man team right now. So I'm sure that coming home at the end of the day and shipping out books isn't something I'm going to necessarily enjoy. At the end of the day, it's work. And I think that anything worth having in life is work. I mean, if you ask anybody who's married, if you ask them if they love their spouse, hopefully they'll say yes, but they'll also say that marriage is work. I mean, being a parent, owning a home are all things that people enjoy, but they're also work. They also always going to have things that you don't necessarily enjoy. And I think for me, there's a lot of the outreach when it comes to having to cold call people or follow up with people. I don't always enjoy, but I know that it's worth it. I've had jobs where sometimes I've done things and I didn't really feel like it was worth it. And I was afraid that I was going down a road that not only am I not enjoying this, but what impact am I making? I mean, I could work for days and weeks on something and it's like, I don't really care. I care enough to because they're paying me. So I've always cared in that respect. But when you feel like you could be doing more, when you feel like you have a passion that could be helping people and that's reasonable, it's something to explore, if nothing else. I take great offense to anybody who says you shouldn't follow your passions because if you're passionate about something, there's no reason not to explore it. Maybe at the end of the day, it's not something you pursue full time, but it is something that could make your life better. Maybe you work your 9 to 5, but you have a hobby and that's what keeps you going. And that's what makes you, passionate. And for me, kind of going into the weeds a little bit here, but for me, this started 2 years ago with me simply saying, I want to be a public speaker. And now, 2 years later, not only have I spoken at several schools here in the Northeast, but I wrote a book that's been published. I coach students, I teach them online, and later on this year, I'm going to be launching a pretty big project. I don't want to go too much into it at the moment because it's not finalized yet, but 2 years ago, I just thought I would speak, and this would be a hobby. Maybe I would go full time someday, and now it's ballooned all because I had the audacity to follow my passion and also not get discouraged when I had to do one of those things that I didn't enjoy or when things didn't necessarily always go my way. That's kind of what I say to people who want to pursue something that they're really passionate about. I say that you should absolutely discover it, but understand that it's not always going to be a bed of roses. There are things that are difficult, and I don't think people will see that. They always kind of see the end product, and they see you as an overnight success, but they don't see all the nights that you were working hard or working late or working for no pay. That's another thing I would say. If you're asking me, there's something I don't like about this. I put in a lot of hours, and it's not like a 9 to 5 where you know you're going to get a check in 2 weeks. You're really betting on yourself because if it doesn't work out, you've spent a lot of time doing work that you never got compensated for. And if you had to take out any kind of business funds, you may never make money to pay that back. So that's something about being an entrepreneur that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that you're putting a lot of work. You have a plan to be compensated someday, but that plan can be a little fuzzy sometimes. So again, very long-winded answer to your question.
So how do you work through the disappointment?
I just think I always try to remember all the positive things that people say. If I don't get, for example, I sent a proposal for a speaking engagement that I felt very positive about. They weren't interested. And it was difficult, but, I also tried to remember that, hey, the day before you get a networking call with somebody who is in this field and they really were positive about what you're doing and they were really congratulatory about what you were doing. And I get a lot of comments and I get a lot of messages on social media from people I haven't talked to in years who are, congratulations, what you're doing is so great, it's so needed. So I think that's kind of what I have to keep in the back of my mind is that people may not necessarily want to book me to speak right now because they might not necessarily understand what I'm trying to say. I think that's something that is always going to be an uphill battle for me because as a youth speaker, I don't go into schools to talk about bullying. It's an important topic, but it's just not who I am. And if I was to speak on that, it wouldn't be genuine. I don't go into schools and talk about some tragic life story because I don't have that. When I say, I'm coming to your school to prepare students for the real world, I don't know how well that translates. And I know that I have to keep working hard to make people understand. I have to start finding other avenues to spread my message. That's why I wrote my book. That's why I do my coaching and everything else that I do, because maybe it is tough to get into the schools, but I know that there are parents out there that understand what I'm saying. I know that there are college students out there that are nervous about what's going to happen after graduation. Those are the people that I have to keep working towards. And lastly, I get through the disappointments because I think about my family. I think about my future kids that I'll have someday. And I know that I personally want to be there for them. I don't want to spend an entire summer in an office when they're home from school. I want to be able to spend time with them. I want to be able to enjoy life. And obviously, I'll always be working hard. But if I keep pushing forward on all of these projects and avenues, someday I'll be able to work a little bit more on my own time. So that's kind of what I keep in the back of my mind. It might be a tough couple of years, but Lord willing, I still have another 50, 60 years on this earth. If I have to sacrifice 2 or 3 to be happier for those 50, that's a trade-off that I always have to keep in the back of my mind.
So I'm curious, what was that first presentation at a school like?
It was interesting. It was a presentation at a college, and it was interesting because I thought it was going to be a much larger audience, and so did the college, and it wasn't as big, but which was probably okay, considering it was my first keynote address. But for me, I think at first it was a little nerve-wracking because it was a long time coming. I spent a long time building this message, interviewing people, practicing my keynotes, building my website. And then I spent a lot of time doing a lot of outreach with nobody getting back to me because they either weren't interested or I wasn't explaining myself correctly. And I remember getting on that stage and kind of reverting back to, okay, let me get through this. Because I think sometimes when you have to present or you have to speak to somebody or you have to be in an awkward conversation, you just say to yourself, oh, let me get through this. And I quickly had to kind of revert out of that mindset and say, no, wait a minute, like this is what you're doing. Like you're not here to get through this. You're here to impart wisdom, to understand that you may not get everybody, but there's going to be at least one person that will benefit from this. And if they change their mindset because of you, then you did your job. After that first one, I think it got easier. And then I would say I did one in December here in the state of New Jersey where I live for about 140 students, high school students. And they were very, very well behaved. They had great questions, but they were a crowd that you kind of had to earn their attention. Otherwise, they were going to tune you out. And when I had them, and I had them locked in and everybody looking at me and nobody looking away and people nodding their heads and people asking questions, and we had to cut off the questions due to time, that was when I said, okay, we're on to something. I said, because these kids don't have to get up and ask questions. These kids can look down at the floor or put their head down, and nobody was doing that. So I said, if I can get these kids, I can get anybody. And, there's been ups and downs with speaking. There's been ups and downs with everything, but it's something that I just have to keep pushing forward through.
I really like your story of how you push through and remember your passions. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something I have to keep doing because I know what I want, I know what I don't want, and I'm on to something. I know that I'm on to something. I know that there's something unique here, and I have to understand that I'm a one-man show. I also have a day job, so there's only so much I can do in a day. There's only so much I can do in a week. But I know for a fact that if I ever decide to just shut everything down and just work in an office and that's it, I know I'm going to regret that. And that kind of keeps me going.
What do you think is behind people's idea of that you cannot encourage people to go after their passion?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, first and foremost, when it comes to articles, and to give a little background, I'm also a marketing professional. So I understand how content works, how content marketing works. I understand the value of clicks. I also understand, for good reasons or bad reasons, due to social media and the internet, there are now 20 websites that are doing the exact same thing. Everybody's a news site. Every channel has its own news channel. Everybody's fighting for your attention, fighting for your eyeballs, and really fighting for your clicks. At the end of the day, most of these places are fighting for your clicks. What you're going to see is you're going to see people who write articles that really don't make a lot of sense. But it's a hot article or it's a hot topic. They throw in a big word into the headline and they want you to click on it. I read something the other day that the New York Times wrote, and it kind of read like, I think somebody wrote it in 5 minutes because they were forced to. And it said, why following your passions is terrible career advice. And I was like, all right, I'll bite because I don't agree with that. The article kind of made a decent point where it said, if you follow your passions and you fail, you might give up because, you're not always going to succeed right away. And I was like, well, first of all, I don't understand why you use the word terrible. And second of all, it was just a very poorly written headline and article. And I think what happens is that people will say to you, people will write an article not because they believe in it, but because it's something that's going to catch your attention. So if we as a younger generation are starting to have the audacity to question things and starting to want to follow our passions and want to job hop and want to look around, you're going to see articles that say, oh, don't do that, because they want you to click on it. So I think that first and foremost is a very important thing for anybody coming up, high school student, college student, to realize that just because somebody wrote an article telling you not to do something, it doesn't mean that they even believe it. It's just something that they wrote to get clicks and show their advertisers how many readers they have. So that's something right off the bat I tell a lot of people. But I also think that there's another thing that I wasn't prepared for when I started this journey, and that's this. And that is that when you have the audacity to follow your passions, to follow your dreams, or to do something that is outside the box, what you do is you awaken something in other people that reminds them that they never had the courage to do the same. And some of them will still support you, but some of them very subtly and underhandedly will try to cut you down, because they had a dream at some point, they had a passion, and they didn't have the courage to do it, or they were too lazy to do it, or maybe they just didn't get good guidance to do it, or something else popped up and they wanted to, but they couldn't. And again, some people who fit that bill are extremely supportive of me. But some people tend to make their little comments at times or send me articles at times. And you can kind of just tell that they're a little maybe peeved that I'm doing these things and that I have all these great things to talk about. And that sometimes if I go to a party or a get together, I might be the topic of conversation for a few minutes because I have a lot of interesting things to update people on. So I think that sometimes people who didn't follow their passions don't want other people to do the same. I think that, that can be true in any walk of life. If somebody else is finding success, certain people aren't going to be happy about that. And lastly, I think it really goes back to this mindset that older generations kind of had drilled into them, that work is work, your personal life is your personal life, and that the two really shall not mix, and that you shouldn't look to be happy at work. Work is work, and a job is a job. Yeah, in a way, work is work, and work's always going to be difficult, but I always go back to the same thing, that you have to live this life, and if you have a skill or a passion, you should be working hard to try to weave that into whatever you do. Even if you're good at numbers and you can make a lot of money working in finance, great. But if you're also really big into helping nonprofits, then you should probably find a way to work in the finance department of a nonprofit, because you're going to get more joy and satisfaction out of making sure that donations go to the right people than making sure that the money that company made goes to the right executive's bonus or something. And those are only things you're going to realize after you understand what jobs are like. I think that a lot of people don't understand that you can get joy and satisfaction out of your work, but at the same time, you're always going to have those kind of crummy days.
I'm also sure there's also another group of people who went through their passions and failed and think that ruined their lives, and they want to prevent you from doing the same.
I mean, I haven't met anybody who has ruined their life. I think that there might be people out there who maybe tried to start a business and it hurt them. Again, I haven't really ran into that too much, but I think it's also a matter of you have to look at the whole picture. Yes, I do all of these different things, but I also do have a day job. So I have a job that I work hard at. I have a separate skill set in marketing and project management that I cultivate, and I always know that I'll be able to pay my bills and save money and do that. So for me, it's like I'm taking care of all that. But I've chosen that in the evenings from 7 to 11 and on Saturdays, instead of watching Netflix, I personally have chosen to start a business. And again, if you're somebody who loves what you do for a living, or enjoys it, or gets satisfaction out of it, or feels like they are putting in a job well done, there's no reason for you to have to put in more hours. There's nothing wrong with that. Any job can be very satisfying depending on the person. But for me, I've chosen a different road. And I think sometimes people will look at that and say, well, it's going to be difficult, or it might be hard, or they might think this. And you kind of have to just understand that they don't necessarily know where you're coming from. You dedicated so much time and energy to various topics, you're going to know more about those topics. So somebody else is going to give you an opinion on that topic, and they're not going to really know what they're talking about. They're going to mean well, but they're not going to know because they didn't spend the last 2 years researching how to be a public speaker, how to get into schools, how to write a book. So those are the things that I always tell people, that if you're going to follow a passion, if you're going to start a business or a side hustle or whatever it may be, and you're doing your research, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to give you advice that you just kind of have to nod through. So that's kind of what I say when people try to give me advice or try to maybe downplay what I'm trying to do, that, okay, I hear you. I appreciate your opinion. But in my head, I know that I have a lot of research that's kind of disqualifying what you're trying to say to me.
So far, what has been your favorite success story?
Honestly, my favorite success story has been my book. So basically what happened last summer was I was gaining a lot of momentum. I had a lot of people telling me they really enjoyed what I was doing, but I was just struggling getting into the schools. Again, I think it's a matter of having references. Schools want to hire somebody that has gone to another school. So I think for me, it was really a matter of how do I get my message out there without relying on somebody to book me? And that's when I kind of realized that I need to write a book. I've always been good at writing. We live in a world now where if you have a good product and a passion and a decent writing skill, you can write a book. It's not easy, but it is possible if you have the right attitude and the right mindset and the right message. I started basically saying to myself, I said, okay, well, everything I talk about and everything I believe, I'm going to put into a book. And it just kind of flowed from there. And the end result was the book that has just recently been published. It's called To the Next Step. And it's for high school and college students. And really anybody who is in high school or college, or even in the last year of middle school. can really benefit from this book because it's a 10-chapter book. It's about 200 pages. It's a very easy read, and it's very conversational. And I walk the student, or even to be honest with you, if you're an educator or a parent, you can read this book, understand what I'm saying, and kind of gain a lot of, advice to give students, a lot of processes, anything that you might be looking for when it comes to getting a student serious about their future. But I really have a conversation with the student, and I talk about a lot of what I've talked about today. I talk about the part of life you don't see coming, the part of life that is being an adult and working full time and entering the workforce. I talk about why they should care about everything that they're about to read. I think it's important that you treat students like adults. I try very hard not to use the word children. I try to speak to them like adults and say, hey, I'm not going to just assume that you should care. I'm going to tell you why you should care. And then we move into high school and college, and every year I go through the different goals for each year. And kind of, here's what you should be looking to do. Here's what you should be looking to achieve. And here's how it's going to help you in the next year. Here's how your sophomore year goals are going to help you in college. Here's how your sophomore year college goals are going to help you in the real world. And everything is always tied into a few things. It's always tied into being prepared, taking advantage of your opportunities, and answering the most important question that I ask, which is, what type of person do you want to become? Because what I've learned is that we've spent years and years asking people, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the problem is that students get asked that question and they don't understand what the answers are and they don't understand what their options are, so they take a guess. So I always say to students, instead of trying to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life at the age of 14, simply start to discover what type of person you want to become. For me, I want to be the type of person who helps people and entertains people. And I think a lot of students will learn that they want to be the type of person who gives advice, who helps certain groups of people, who works in certain industries, certain organizations, somebody who has a huge passion for sports, has a passion for nonprofits, is really invested in helping the homeless, pediatric cancer patients, whatever it may be. I walk them through this process where they can figure out on their own what type of person they want to become. And then that's when they start to make a list of jobs that line up with that type of person. And then they can start to understand what goes into those jobs. What are the day-to-day? What is it like? What do people like? What don't they like? I talk to them about how to network, how to connect with people that are already in those jobs. Because a lot of people thought they wanted a job, but they never really understood what it was like. And then they got into it and they hated it. There's people who thought they wanted to be a teacher, then they became a teacher, and they hated it. And that probably could have been avoided in a lot of instances. The book goes into that. The book goes into graduation. We spend an entire chapter talking about entering the workforce. Talks about a lot of things that students have told me or graduates have told me they weren't prepared for. So my book is definitely probably my proudest success story. It was, again, a lot of work that I've yet to be compensated for. And I believe in myself and I believe that I will, but I think it takes a certain type of mindset to put in 20 hours of work every week and not get a paycheck at the end of it. I think that takes a certain type of mindset to be working up front for free. So my book is available. To be honest with you, it's available now. I can tell you that you can order it on my website, which is my name, kylegrapone.com, but it's also going to be in the show notes, in the show description. So you can go ahead and order it now. I would say that please bear with me if you order it. Today's the 28th when we're recording. I'm not sure when it's going to go live. If you order it in the next week or so, bear with me a little bit because we're still getting the logistics down. But you can go ahead and order the print version or the digital version. They're both available on my website. If you order the print version, obviously I'll sign it for you. And it's something that I think is going to make a great graduation gift. But again, I think it's something that any age, even if you're about to enter your senior year of college, I think that there's a lot you can take away from it. And again, to give it to a college senior, give them the digital version for $10, I think that's a great deal. So that's kind of my plug and also what I'm most proud of so far in this journey.
Awesome. We are heading towards the end of our interview. One thing I like to ask my interviewees is to give a 1 minute of motivation. You can think of this as a metaphor that you have a time travel machine to your 8-year-old self, and you only have 1 minute to convey the information to set yourself up for a year life of success, or basically taking your entire life mission and putting it down to 1 minute.
Sure. So if I could go back in time and talk to my 8-year-old self, I would say a few things. First and foremost, Kyle, understand that you're just different. It's not a bad different. You're just different. You're a little more emotional than everyone else. You care a little bit more than everyone else. You're outspoken. You're outside the box. You're very intelligent, despite what your grades may say. You're not always going to think you're the smartest kid in the class because you're not always going to be the best test taker, but just keep pushing forward and understand that you can use your passion for entertaining people. You can use that as a career, but also understand that you're not the type of person that should be sitting in an office every day. You need to take high school seriously and you need to take college seriously, and you need to find career paths that allow you to move around, create, explore, entertain, and help people. And you should be doing that outside of an office as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your interview. I very much enjoy listening to your pursuit of your passions and the stated goal of helping people find their desire. And the idea of, instead of what do you want to be when you grow up, who do you want to become, is such a more powerful question that I'm sure can help many people in this world. And good luck in getting your message out there. And I'm excited to hear of all the success stories from the people who read your book.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe we can do something in 6 to 12 months and we can do a little recap. But yeah, no, I definitely appreciate you having me on. I definitely appreciated this conversation. Like I said, if you want to contact me for coaching, my email is going to be in the show description. Again, all the information about buying my book, social media, all that good stuff. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to connect with you. And Brett, thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, hope your day is special.
Thank you. You too.
And there you have it, folks. Kyle Grapone's wonderful interview, a tale of inspiration and resilience. I am very thankful for him sharing his trials and tribulations in creating his speaking business, being willing to tell us that as of right now, he still does have a full-time job. I know when I first started, I was actually ashamed to tell people that I work full-time. After 9 or 10 years, I don't even like putting it, I say 8 years, I'm used to having a full-time job and grateful for actual money because shoot, solid 8 months I didn't have a job. And when you run out of unemployment, you kind of happy that you have a full-time job while making not enough money to support yourself in your side business. So that was really cool for him to say and to share with us. I love his passion in talking about getting people ready for the real world. That while I don't agree with the memes of taking away algebra and other subjects, but creating a class for real world situations, and pretty much I think all high schools should have a class on finding yourself and the importance of at least trying to find what you want and what you like. I remember only taking a few tests, and they're standardized tests that send you information of you answered all these things correctly. You should be a computer analyst. That's what I got, but also what I wanted because I went to school to be a computer programmer. Ended up being a software tester. Well, I, like probably a lot of his students, wasn't ready for real life. Adulting is the new term I believe kids use these days. And yeah, so I think that's a very good thing that he teaches other people. I really enjoy the way he shared that, and the passion did come through in what he was trying to say. I enjoyed that, and the fact that he still keeps on going. And I have also made those calls and get no replies in those emails, and I do take it harder than I should. And hearing him and how much success he's having in his first 2 years really energized me that, yeah, maybe I should stop starting and just keep on going and keep on pushing and going forward, and that will get me closer to what I want. Yeah, because the reality is the people who make it are the ones who don't give up and just keep on being consistent. Consistency is the key to success. If you're going to be successful, no one who's quit's ever succeeded. Simple as that. I mean, how can you succeed if you quit? Because you quit. You're not doing it anymore. Yeah, so I'm very thankful for what Kyle has shared with us today. If you're interested in working with Kyle or checking out his book, Kyle's book, To the Next Step, is now available for purchase at his website, www.kylegrappone.com. Hopefully I've been saying his name right. KYLEGRAPPONE is how you spell it. You can also follow him on Facebook and Instagram at Kyle G Speaks. Sounds like almost a rap name, Kyle G. That shows how old I am, because that would be a 90s rap name. Or 80s, more 80s. Or 90s, Warren G was 90s. Anyway, I'm reading his thing. And on LinkedIn by simply searching his name. If you're interested in speaking or coaching services, please email him at kyle@kylegrappone.com. That is good marketing. Everything is very easy to find. So if you are looking to market yourself, just, take a cue on that. And don't listen to me, because my Instagram is Joyous Expansion. My Twitter is also Joyous Expansion, but my Facebook is Increase Your Joy. See, that's not how you do it. But you can email me at BRE2TsDUPR2Es@joyousexpansion.com if you have any questions, because I am Brett Dupree, your Joyous Expansion Life Coach, champion of authentic joy, catalyst of transformation, Grand Poobah cult leader of the Church of Awesome, here to remind you to be joy, to be love, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach, good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue, I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Yeah.